You're listening to a Monster Kid podcast.
Why don't we rent a video tonight?
Yeah, can we please?
On a weeknight?
Yeah, come on, Mom. It's okay.
Sure. Come on. Let's throw caution to the wind.
Put a little weekend in your week. Rent a video.
Season's greetings, everybody, and welcome back to Vericon Video, a show where we relive forgotten and unforgettable movies that once lined the shelves of video stores everywhere. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Jordan. Hey, I want to try this one week. Today, we're taking you to Gotham City at Christmastime to deliver a dark chapter in the story of the Caped Crusader, thanks to the political aspirations of one Oswald Cobblepot, the cynicism of one Selina Kyle, and the more ambitious directorial tactics of one Tim Burton. It's the Bat, the Cat, and the Penguin, together at last, in 1992's Batman Returns.
So sit back, relax, and...
Welcome to the Oswald Cobblepot School of Driving. Gentlemen, start your screaming.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I have the only gun on board. Welcome to Con Air.
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
Okay, good evening, America, and welcome aboard Apollo 13.
I'm so glad you could come. This is going to be such an exciting day. I hope you're enjoying it. I think you will.
Nothing and no one can stop Batman from returning home. The movie event of the year is now for sale on video cassette. So bring home the Bat.
What do you want?
The Cat.
Yeah.
And the Penguin.
Gotta fly.
In the movie Rolling Stone called explosively entertaining. Batman Returns.
A penguin man living in the sewers beneath Gotham City joins up with wicked, shock-headed businessman Max Schreck to win over the citizens of Gotham in a bid for mayor and wreak havoc on the city. But after Schreck tries to kill his timid assistant, Selina Kyle, she is transformed into the whip-snapping Catwoman and teams up with the aspiring mayoral prospect to destroy Batman and her former boss. But sparks fly unexpectedly when she confronts the Caped Crusader.
So, where are we both with Tim Burton? I mean, what do we like and dislike about his work? Because this is a very Burton movie.
It is. I'm a fan through Sleepy Hollow. Like, I love almost everything he's made. Like, he's a visionary director that I feel like I really get. Like, I love him as a stylist and for the whimsical, grotesque, and sometimes like surreal aesthetic he brings to his work. I feel like in later years, it feels like he sold out in some ways, but or kind of lost some of the magic of the earlier years. But what do you think?
It's honestly, it's a different take for me because I grew up in the middle of his sort of selling out period. Like a lot of the movies that I imagine a lot of that you grew up with of, you know, the Edward Scissorhands and the Batmans and the Ed Woods and such. That was like, I had to get to those later into my movie watching years because I grew up with stuff like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And that one, I shouldn't admit as much as I do that I kind of enjoy in parts. Like, it's not the original, but like it's still a solid Tim Burton movie. Mm-hmm. And it's very much him, even though it is a bit more candy coated and weirdly photographed. But yeah, I love his early stuff. I love, you know, Beetlejuice and the Batmans. But then like he gets to a point where like he gets a bit too self-indulgent and he does things like the Alice in Wonderland movie he did. Mm-hmm. And like Sleepy Hollow, I'm still mixed on because there are parts of it that work and there are other parts of it that are too silly and too hammery for his own good. Mm-hmm. And he's gotten to a point where like he's honestly a parody of himself now, doing Dumbo and whatnot.
Whenever Joseph and I did an episode on Sleepy Hollow, that's pretty much how I felt too, because whenever it came out, I watched it a lot and I really enjoyed it. But then whenever I watched it for the show, I don't know, my feelings about it really changed. Like it seemed like kind of how you put it, like it was a little too self-indulgent in a way. Yeah. Which I think it's fine. Like it's, you know, certainly a faithful nod to, you know, the early Hammer films and some like you know, the Mario Bava kinds of
it's a little giallo-y, you know.
Yeah, but you know, I think it's fine. But yeah, after that I really stopped paying attention to what was coming out.
And regretfully, I still haven't seen Big Fish. And I should, because
I haven't either.
Like, it's been in like 17 different streaming queues over the past like 8 years for me, and I still haven't gotten to it.
Same.
And I have no excuse at this point. I read the book as well in high school.
Oh, okay. What'd you think of the book?
Yeah, no, it's a good book because That was also just a really good year of high school for me in terms of English, because that was one of my favorite teachers that I had. He really got a lot of my eccentricities, but also like it's a good book. It's a good way of dealing with tall tales and exaggerated stories and how you really sum up a life that's too wild to even be real. Mm-hmm. And so I love the way that book was written and how he talked about this sort of stuff. And I want to know what Tim Burton did with it, because I've seen pieces of the movie, but I've never seen the full thing.
So like I grew up watching all the early Burton films from Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Beetlejuice and Batman 89 and of course Batman Returns. So what are some of your memories of or connections to Returns?
Well, I've talked, I think, on this podcast about my Batman related sort of history growing up here with the Batman movies. And like I've talked about the fact that Batman Forever used to be my favorite of the Batman movies because it was the most weird looking and the most like Jim Carrey was in it. And it spoke the most to me as a kid. And Batman Returns, I remember it being on as a kid, and I remember it was one of those movies that my dad did not love. And it took me a while to figure out, well, I think it was too dark for him, especially considering 89, which he does love, and so do I. But it was the kind of thing where, like, I don't think he got the sort of grotesque German expressionist kind of thing that Burton was going for here. Or maybe it was the kind of thing where like it didn't fit with the genres, because he didn't like License to Kill either because it was too dark. Whereas it's mostly just a way of subverting the actual genre tropes rather than actually succumbing to them. But yeah, I was always sort of turned off of Batman Returns as a kid. I always thought it wasn't one of the better ones. And then there were actually two times where I thought about it in college. There was one time where like one of the first weeks I was on campus and me and my roommate found it on cable and we were just riffing on it and riffing on Christopher Walken in it and just having fun with that. And then a couple of years later, I was talking with my roommate my junior year, who happens to be Jack from RMR, who I only talk about on this podcast like every episode. But he and I were talking about the Batman movies, and he told me then that he liked Returns better than the original, better than 89. And I'm like, that's odd. I think around then I watched it again with that mindset in mind. Jack was also the one who opened up to the fact that both the Burton movies are better if you turn the color off your TV.
Yes.
And that's something I've preached to as many people as possible, including you, Brandon.
Yes.
And I watched it in that sort of college era, and I'm like, okay, I think I get it now. And then on this watch for this episode, I really got it. I fell in love with it like I should have all those years ago, because I got like the camp sort of insane aspect of it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I grew up watching it, like I said, and I've really grown to appreciate this in a much different and deeper way. Okay, so I saw this in theaters, and I had some of the action figures before it came out. I had, like, there were two army penguins that came in a single action figure pack, and I remember playing with those in the car before going in to see the movie. And I got the VHS for Christmas, 92, Good. I'm guessing, and it turned out to be a bootleg my uncle bought off the street in New York City.
That is the true way to watch Batman Returns or any Daniel Waters movie. Steal it.
Well, it was strange because I always wondered why the quality was so bad, and because it had like a legit sticker on the VHS, and it came in like a professional sleeve. But it wasn't until like I was watching through the end credits, and all of a sudden it changes to a completely different movie. So it had just been recorded over for some reason. So. I don't know. It was just a strange revelation there that this was a phony and this was a knockoff off the street. But I had a lot of the merch growing up, and I even recorded like clips from this movie using my Talk Boy, which was like the coolest toy I've ever owned in my life.
The Home Alone 2 one, right?
Yeah, from Home Alone 2.
Yeah.
And I would listen back as I played around the house or at school, like to memorize big chunks of dialogue from the movie. Nice. And at one point, and I just remembered this today, but my parents took me to Huntsville, Alabama, which was about 100 miles from where we lived, to the Von Braun Civic Center to meet Batman and Catwoman. And it was just like this kid's meet and greet thing. But the Batmobile was there. And I remember the two actors as Batman and Catwoman were addressing each other as Batman and Catwoman, and that their costumes were screen accurate, except for one thing. Catwoman's mask wasn't connected to her suit, so she had this long, flowing 1992 hair cascading out the back of it. And the Joker was there for some reason. He survived, and a Polaroid picture of us was taken, but alas, it's lost to time. I do remember it was signed, "The Joker was here." Love the 90s.
Man, that sounds like the sort of like a Six Flags kind of like character work kind of thing. The actors behind that must have been really into it. Like,
yeah, I mean, I remember just being very impressed with how realistic and authentic everything looked. And in creating just that really cool moment for whatever I was 7 years old.
Yeah, craft the illusion, create the reality for these kids. That's got to be really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think today it would just be, some guy in a off the rack Dark Knight Rises costume.
It'd be a Times Square Batman.
Yeah. Vegas Strip Batman.
Yeah.
But watching it as an adult, it's a totally different experience.
Oh yeah.
It's one I haven't gone back to much in recent years, so I'm coming at it with fresh eyes for this episode. Man, I can't tell you how deeply I've fallen in love with this movie again.
Same.
Like it's the first time. And also, listeners out there, as Jordan mentioned, if you can see it in black and white, do it. It'll steal your breath away, and I'm not kidding.
It'll add even more to the sort of German expressionist kind of thing Burton was going for.
Yeah, and it works so well. Like I have a Roku TV and I just dialed the color down to 0. But if you're watching it on a computer, you can use a VLC or something and just turn the saturation down. Probably very similar experience. But yeah, do yourself a favor this Christmas.
Yeah.
All right, so let's give you guys a little bit of background about Batman Returns. It's directed by Tim Burton, stars Michael Keaton, Danny DeVito, Michelle Pfeiffer, Christopher Walken, and Michael Gough. Burton originally did not want to direct another Batman film. He said, quote, "I will return if the sequel offers something new and exciting." He said this in 1989. "Otherwise, it's a most dumbfounded idea," end quote. But Burton decided to direct Edward Scissorhands for 20th Century Fox, while Warner Brothers was developing a strip with Sam Hamm, who had the Catwoman and the Penguin going after hidden treasure.
That's a pirate movie. Hold on there.
Burton agreed to return after they granted him more creative control and replaced Hamm with Daniel Waters, who we have encountered previously on our episode on Hudson Hawk, who caught Burton's attention after seeing Heathers and was initially interested in having him work on a sequel to Beetlejuice. And we'll dig much more into the script here in just a moment. But Bo Welch, Burton's collaborator on Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhands, replaced Anton Furst as production designer for the first movie, since Furst was unable to return for the sequel due to contractual obligations with Columbia Pictures, as he was working on what would be his final credited work prior to his suicide, which was Awakenings with Robert De Niro and Robin Williams.
Yeah, that's the wrong kind of irony. A guy whose last movie before suicide is a Robin Williams movie.
It's dark, man.
You can take that one out if you want. I'm sorry. It's gallows humor to the nth. Robin would have liked it, though.
He would have, yeah.
Ooh.
Stan Winston, who worked with Burton on Edward Scissorhands, designed Danny DeVito's makeup. Good. And according to DeVito, it was 4.5 hours of makeup and getting into the costume. They got it down to 3 hours by the end of the shoot.
You think it would have been like more time if DeVito was taller? I'm just doing all the darkest jokes in the book today. I'm sorry, guys.
I don't know. Like, does he seem like a chatty guy in interviews?
I'm not sure.
He seems like he's a little bit more reserved, but I was thinking of someone like Robert Englund, who would be in the chair for hours getting made up as Freddy Krueger. And they said it took so long because he would just be talking the whole time, be telling all these stories about like, oh, this one time whenever Barbara Streisand was working in the clubs in the early 80s, blah, blah, blah. It's like, just shut the fuck up, Robert. Let me finish this makeup.
That sounds like Robert Englund as well. He sounds like that kind of personality. Yeah.
So the movie was released on June 19th, 1992. It grossed $282 million worldwide on a total budget of $80 million. And it was the first film to be released with Dolby SRD technology, later known as Dolby Digital. Film was nominated for 2 Academy Awards, Best Visual Effects and Best Makeup, as well as 2 BAFTA Awards. And it was the 6th highest grossing film of 1992, behind Aladdin, The Bodyguard, Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, Basic Instinct, and Lethal Weapon 3.
Wait, more people saw Lethal Weapon 3 than Batman Returns?
Yes.
Okay, then.
I was shocked as well. I was actually surprised that The Bodyguard was so high.
Yeah, well, that I can sort of understand because that movie was a phenomenon both in its soundtrack and in the general, like, Whitney Houston apex of it. Like, people didn't see that because it was a good movie. It's not. They saw it because of Whitney Houston being the hugest star at the moment.
Yes.
Lethal Weapon 3, I think it was just, I don't know, the first 2 made money. Okay. I'm watching all of those for the first time this week. So that's why I've seen the first 2. The third one is like next on my radar. So I'll see if it's deserving of more money than Batman Returns. It probably isn't. But I like the second one.
Sadly, the one I watched most was the fourth one, just because it was just because it was on HBO all the time.
Huh.
And it's
interesting.
It's not that great, but I'm curious to hear what you think about it once you get there.
I'll get to it eventually. I don't think it'll top 1 or 2 for me.
This film was released on VHS and Laserdisc in October 1992 and appeared on DVD February 2009. It came out on Blu-ray a year later and in 2019 on 4K UHD Blu-ray. Side note, the quality of those 4K releases from the 1989 Batman through Batman and Robin is outstanding. But they recolored the picture, and at least on the 89 film, like they replaced a lot of the sound effects, and I don't like it one bit that the original mix wasn't included on the disc. Like, I don't know. There's too much teal tinting going on. But yeah, the sound effects in 89, like I know what that movie sounds like.
Yes.
And I haven't watched the 4K version in full, but I've watched clips on YouTube that compares the two. And man, it really upset me.
Yeah, I've heard similar things about the 4K re-releases of a lot of Disney animated movies from the same time. Because what they've done is if they've like really scrubbed some of the animation cells and frames, and they've taken away a lot of the intricate sort of nature of a lot of the animation. They've sort of scrubbed in. It's just a lot more blank and simple now. I have mixed feelings about 4K.
Yeah, I feel like there's too much of this desire to modernize older films and to give them this kind of gloss of just like contemporary, like color timing, just the color tone of modern films. I don't know, maybe they upgraded the sound effects just because like whenever they were making a new mix, like maybe the quality wasn't that great. I'm not sure, but I digress. A sequel, Batman Forever, was released in 1995 with Val Kilmer replacing Keaton as Batman. We did a commentary on that for Patreon, so you should go check that out. And we did Batman and Robin.
Yes.
So there you go. Be a patron. Patreon.com/Farrakhan video. But with Warner Brothers moving forward on developing Batman Forever in June 93, a Catwoman spinoff was announced. Michelle Pfeiffer was to reprise her role, with the character not to appear in Forever. Burton became attached as director, while producer Denise Denovi and writer Daniel Waters also returned. But in January 94, Burton was unsure of his plans to direct Catwoman or an adaptation of The Fall of the House of Usher.
Okay, then.
So Waters turned in his Catwoman script to Warner Brothers the same day Batman Forever was released. And Waters joked, quote, "Turning it in the same day Batman Forever opened may not have been my best logistical move, but in that it's the celebration of the fun for the whole family Batman, Catwoman is definitely not a fun for the whole family script." End quote. The film labored in development hell for many years, with Pfeiffer replaced by Ashley Judd, and then the film ended up becoming the critically panned Catwoman from 2004, starring Halle Berry.
Yeah, and just for the record, I checked. Daniel Waters is not credited as a writer on Catwoman, so rest assured he has no involvement in that horrible, horrible movie.
Yes, he was. I read an interview with him where he said that like so many writers had been involved that whenever it finally came time to arbitrate, like he declined to get involved. And so,
good.
Yeah. And if any of you haven't heard that term, arbitration, like that's just like a writer's guild thing, like where like a committee determines who gets credit for writing the movie.
Right. I learned a lot about this process when, when I had my screenwriting class with the writer of Ronin.
Oh, yes.
He had to really arbitrate to make sure he still got credit on that movie because David Mamet did a rewrite, and he had to make sure Mamet got like a pseudonym credit as a story. So it's a whole thing. But if you guys like me blathering on about screenwriting terms, you're going to love this next bit of the podcast.
Yeah, we talk about this script a lot in this episode. So
we do, because it's very important that people understand how the anatomy of this corresponds to different people, because the script itself, okay, according to the official, the credits, IMDb, everything, there is a story credit for Sam Hamm and Dan Waters and a screenplay credit for Dan Waters. This is 66% of the actual dichotomy of the script. So let's analyze this real quick. The original draft of the Batman Returns, or a sequel to Batman, was originally crafted by Sam Hamm, who wrote Batman 89. This was more of a direct sequel to Batman 89, complete with a return for Vicky Vale. The Joker was supposed to be back a little bit. This was still Penguin and Catwoman mostly, but this was Sam Hamm. And Burton got a hold of it when he eventually took the helm of the project, and when he decided he did not want to do a direct sequel to Batman, he recommissioned it to Dan Waters.
Yes, and I had read that the subplot of the Penguin running for mayor came from the 60s TV series, episodes Hisner the Penguin and Disner the Penguin, which would be later repurposed for the TV show Gotham.
Right. Now, I haven't seen the show Gotham, but from what I've heard, Robin Lord Taylor as Cobblepot is one of the best parts of it.
It's probably the only great part of that. I watched the first 3 or 4 seasons of that, and I tried really, really hard to like it. But Robin Lord Taylor, he's outstanding. But it feels kind of CW-ish. But it was like a Fox show, but it just feels very watered down to me.
It feels like a sort of WB CBS product. Because that's a lot of the CW crew is just the WB Canada crew. Dan Waters writes 5 drafts of a Batman Returns script. He adds the darkness of this piece that still exists in the final product. Including how cynical Catwoman is, a lot of that dialogue in her scenes, basically Selena Kyle's entire character, as well as the conflict between her and Max Schreck. However, and this is a very big however, it's not limited to Hamm and Waters. This script does have a third writer that went uncredited, and that, of course, is Wesley Strick. Before this, he was known best for True Believer and Arachnophobia, and Cape Fear, I think, was before this. Mm-hmm. He was also one of the many writers credited to the Doom Superman Lives script in the late 90s.
Yeah, and just a few here from Wesley Strick's filmography. Yeah, Cape Fear and Wolf, which would also star Michelle Pfeiffer.
Yes.
The Saint, Doom, 2005, and A Nightmare on Elm Street, 2010.
So you could just clearly see the filmography sort of just get worse and worse as he goes.
Yes.
Wesley Strick did polish a lot of the dialogue, which is admittedly a bit more cartoonish and less watersy in places. Because he, I think, was more of a student of the comics, of the over-the-top nature of how a lot of those are written. And he added a lot of even darker elements, like the nose biting, usually attributed to Waters.
Yeah, Strick recalls, quote, "When I was hired to write Batman Returns, or Batman 2 at the time, the big problem of the script was the Penguin's lack of a master plan," end quote. Warner Brothers presented Strick with the warming or freezing Gotham City. This was a plot point they would later reuse in Batman and Robin, of course. Strick gained inspiration from a Moses parable that had the Penguin killing the firstborn sons of Gotham. And a similar notion was used when the Penguin's parents threw him into a river as a baby.
So we go from, okay, let's do something like a supervillain plan, freeze the city, to how about killing of the firstborn? To quote Hedley Lamar from Blazing Saddles, too Jewish.
And I'll talk about this later, but that's probably my least favorite part of the film.
Yeah.
But
it's a bit extreme.
Yeah, but I think without it, I don't know, like the original script ends with the big climax at the relighting of the tree ceremony. Like that's where things end. And of course, there's no master plan, as Strick mentioned, but I feel like they were a little too worried that there might not be enough going on. However, I think in retrospect, I mean, it's bursting at the seams with plots and subplots.
Yeah, literally. And also, one of the very interesting things about the early drafts of this is that, if you can believe it, there were more characters involved, especially more Batman lore characters. The character of Max Schreck was supposed to be Billy D. Williams as Harvey Dent, at least in the Sam Hamm draft. And the live wire and electronic fusion that kills Schreck in the finished film was supposed to give Harvey Dent's face the sort of right side scarring or left side scarring that would make him into Two-Face and set up a third Burton film. Ultimately, the studio didn't want to give Billy D. Williams a raise.
This deal is getting worse all the time.
And Max Schreck was created and given all of Harvey Dent's dialogue. Now, the very interesting part about this is, as interesting as Walken is in this, before Christopher Walken was cast in this, David Bowie was considered for Max Schreck, which is very, as much as David Bowie is, a serious actor in places, I can barely even see that. He turned it down to make, this was 91, 92, so I think he wanted to make another album with Tin Machine.
Yeah, and according to some reports, it was so that he could be in Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, but that had to have been one day of shooting, 2 tops.
Yeah.
He's in that so little. In any case, we didn't get him.
Exactly, and this is just me and my excessive David Bowie knowledge, But 91, he was also on tour. He was doing the Sound and Vision tour. And then right after that, he went right into the studio with his side project, Tin Machine, and they were working on another album and tour there. So I think he might have been a bit too busy in this period. And also, he had to write a song for Cool World, which was the following year.
Oh.
The ending song of that, which is called Real Cool World, is arguably the only good part of that movie.
Still haven't seen it.
Give it a watch if you're interested. It's very odd.
Would it pair well with Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
It would, but I would suggest a couple of shots in between.
Okay, that's fair.
You watch Who Framed Roger Rabbit. That's an incredible movie.
Yes.
And right as you're putting in Cool World, you have whatever it is that'll just make it a little easier to go down. And then you watch the Ralph Bakshi classic.
When Joseph was on the show, we teamed up with the boys at Random Movie Roulette, Lewis, Mike, and Jack, to talk about Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So you should go check that out if you haven't heard it already.
And that is a really good episode, by the way.
Yeah, that was a lot of
I
fun.
don't just say that because everyone involved I'm pretty friendly with, but that is an excellent episode and a great entry point into RMR and Vericon.
In some early drafts, Max Schreck was the golden boy of the Cobblepot family, whereas the Penguin was the deformed outsider. And it turned out Schreck would be the Penguin's long-lost brother. And this is probably from a very, very early Waters draft, like first draft, but I couldn't confirm where this came from.
I mean, if you have the choice of being called Max Schreck or Max Cobblepot and you go with Schreck, it's a better name. Rolls off the tongue.
Yes.
It's a good movie, too. Anyway, foreplay for later on.
Yes.
All right. So, and also talking about other characters that are supposed to be in this, an early draft of the script also included a setup for Dick Grayson, a.k.a. Robin, that would enter into Batman Returns late and mostly set up a sequel. And at early draft stages, this was mostly Sam Hamm's draft, Marlon Wayans was being pursued to play Dick Grayson, and I think he won the role and everything. And this is at least from what I got from sources, but I think the response from fans was not kind, which was a lot like Michael Keaton in 1988, where the outcry was that a comedically inclined actor like Wayans shouldn't come near a comic book role. Unlike with Keaton in 1988, this outcry plus script changes led to Wayans' deal falling through. I wonder why fan response cost Marlon Wayans a role, but didn't cost Michael Keaton a role. Much to think about.
Yeah. I will add that in the early Waters draft that I read, parts of that from the Sam Hamm draft is still in there, where Batman, his Batmobile is in need of repair, so he drives it to a garage, and there's this kid. He's credited as the kid, and it's a young man in a jumpsuit with an R on his breast. And so that was going to be the setup for bringing in the Robin character.
The only thing is that Robin does not come from a line of mechanics. He comes from a line of acrobats.
Yes.
Everyone knows that.
It's a really long scene too. Like, so you can tell they were really trying to establish like a rapport between Batman and the kid, but I'll be talking about that draft a lot just to give you guys a heads up.
And also the very famous final shot of the movie with Catwoman looking up as we pan out, that wasn't even in the script. It was 11th hour addition to the film. They couldn't even get Michelle Pfeiffer back for filming, so they had to shove a body double up against a matte backdrop and fake it as good as they could in order to get the desired effect. And of course, the final shot works, but it's basically just a way of Warner Brothers going, hey, we shouldn't make the audience think that Catwoman is dead. We might want to use her in sequels, so throw her in here.
Yeah, and I remember everybody was buzzing about this, that she's going to be back in the next Batman movie. Mm-hmm. And that Catwoman's return was a promise that Warner Brothers didn't keep. Instead we got Catwoman 2004. But, I'd really like to see Daniel Waters' early drafts for that.
Yeah.
And then one of the interviews that I read with him, he said he ran into Michelle Pfeiffer at some dinner, some function, and they had talked a little bit about that because apparently it was something that she really, really wanted to do at the time.
Yeah. She seems like she really enjoys herself in this movie, so of course she'd want to do it a little bit more.
Yeah, like if we had gotten a Daniel Waters scripted, Tim Burton directed Catwoman spinoff, my God, I'm so hard right now.
Wait a minute.
Sorry, guys. I've been working with Lewis too much. He's rubbing off on me.
I say one thing about Sandra Bernhard giving me a weird boner, and you're suddenly starting up. Oh,
Random Movie Roulette. This is all your fault. Look what you've done to me.
Yes. Damn it, Lewis.
So let's give you guys a little bit of context here. So what was going on in 1992? So we had several things. So the maiden voyage of the Space Shuttle Endeavour was launched from the Kennedy Space Center, Florida, May 7th. Bill Clinton becomes president. Mafia boss John Gotti is sentenced to life in prison after being found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and racketeering. Cartoon Network is established by the Turner Broadcasting System.
Yes!
The largest shopping mall in the United States, the Mall of America, opened its doors to shoppers in August. Rioting breaks out in Los Angeles following the acquittal of 4 white police officers accused of beating black motorist Rodney King. And Windows 3.1 is released by Microsoft. So this is the year that we were working with, folks.
Lots to digest for the people in the news.
Yes. So let's see, what other action films came out in 92? So we had Passenger 57, Under Siege. Hey.
Oh.
It's back. Why is this movie showing up in every episode we've done?
It's the Seagal effect.
It is the Seagal effect. Patriot Games, which I think came out a few weeks before, just a couple of weeks before Batman Returns. Lethal Weapon 3 and Universal Soldier.
Yeah, not a lot of these are anything resembling Batman Returns as a genre film. It's an action film, yes, but it's very much like an outsider action film.
Let's look at some of the like family or kid-friendly fare of 92. Right. So we have Home Alone 2, Lost in New York, Beethoven, Fern Gully, The Mighty Ducks, Three Ninjas, Aladdin, Sister Act, A League of Their Own, which came out the same day as Returns, and Mom and Dad Save the World.
It's just a weird bit in the middle of those, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth noting that there really wasn't anything quite like it in terms of like family-friendly films or action films that year. I mean, mostly we got a lot of lighter action comedies. But, of course, Batman came out 3 years prior. But I don't know, is there anything else we could say about Returns coming out in this particular market? Like, because this was a summer release.
Right. Which is odd because this is a Christmas movie.
Right, and exactly.
I would have put this out in December, but Warner Brothers wanted a big summer movie like the original.
Right.
The other thing is there's a big difference between summer blockbusters and winter Christmas blockbusters, because the summer ones are supposed to be, okay, take the kids, bring everybody. It's a big bang and a booming good time. And the winter ones can be like, okay, these are more of like because it can be mixed in with the Oscar hits and it can be more darker and be more like colder.
Yes.
And I feel like putting it out in May rather than in December may have made people think it wasn't going to be as dark as it was.
Right. Yeah, I feel very, very much the same way. And I want to, because we're going to have a whole segment where we talk about, like, is this film too dark?
Yeah.
And we'll save some of that for later. So at the time, like, Batmania was in full swing, like all the merchandising. And like, here's just a list of the different Batman action figures produced for the Returns line. Like, just add Batman after each of these, okay? Firebolt, Rocket Blast, Aerostrike, Air Attack, Arctic, Crime Attack, Deep Dive, Laser, Power Wing, Shadow Wing, Skywinch, Thunder Whip, Hydrocharge, Night Climber, and Jungle Tracker.
So they had like 16 Batman and what, like one Catwoman toy?
Yes.
Like, is that how the sexist toy manufacturers were doing it?
That is absolutely correct. And in fact, like the Penguin toy was just a repaint of like a Penguin figure produced much, much earlier, like before 89 came out.
Yeah.
And there was also a Bruce Wayne action figure.
Good.
With his like a cowl and cape and armor that you could put on, which was really cool. It's probably one of my favorite action figures growing up.
Good. I mean, you need more like Secret Identity ones where you can like throw on the actual costume.
Yeah.
Like they would do those with like the Iron Man action figures back in the day. The Toy Biz would do for the animated series.
Yeah.
So.
Like out of this list, like, did we need a Jungle Tracker Batman?
He's not going to the jungle when Batman Returns. It's a friggin' winter movie.
Right.
The jungle, I mean, the closest thing to a jungle one is Batman Begins.
Yeah, that's true. We do get that. But like Batman before, like Returns had a clear marketing plan geared towards children, but this is also, as we've said, a very adult movie, and we're going to be talking about that much later too. But I don't think it's just, we'll just have some stuff packaged in for parents when they take their kids to see this. Like the Batman IP would have resonated with adult audiences who had grown up reading the comics and or watched the 66 Adam West TV show. So like the grace notes of campiness would be recognizable from that, but as well as the villains, but it's dark and serious enough for adults to enjoy. But like Batmania was all the rage on playgrounds and in lunchroom chatter at schools all across the world.
It's funny that they bring up all the merchandising and such, because I remember there being, I read this somewhere, that the original opening scene of Batman Returns was going to be like literally like a shop window in Gotham City, and just all of the like Batman merchandise things or something.
Yeah.
And that getting blown up.
Yeah, that was in one of Waters' draft.
Yeah.
Yeah, like he wanted to play with the idea of commercialism.
Of course.
Or commercializing the Batman character like within the story. But yeah, I mean, I think that would have been a really cool thing to insert into the film.
I mean, I love the opening we got, but
oh yeah,
it would have been interesting.
The signal goes out. Batman returns.
Catwoman's been spotted.
The sound of power is heard.
It's Firebolt Batman.
See ya, Batman.
Batman's turbo-powered Batmobile flies into high gear.
I'm out of here.
In a flash, it's a high-powered Bat missile.
Perfect getaway.
It's Rocket Blast Batman.
Rockets screaming, lasers firing.
Happy landings, Catwoman.
Batman returns.
Let's get into some of our deeper discussions here. So let's have a look at some of the connections to DC Comics or Batman lore or even the previous film.
Right. So, I mean, I put this up here because I was expecting like a lot of deep dive references. But one of the things I always forget about the earlier 90s comic book movies is that they weren't exactly putting in a lot of quote unquote true believer moments like a lot of current superhero movies do. I think just the what I would equate to a current comic book movie Easter egg is late in the movie when Cobblepot has in the monkey and the monkey hands him a note. The note that Batman writes out to Cobblepot is done in Bob Kane's handwriting. And Bob Kane is the Batman equivalent of Stan Lee, one of the creators. And, he had a full-on drawing kind of cameo in Batman 89.
Yes.
And this is his contribution to this one.
And that note that the monkey hands Cobblepot is on Batman-branded stationery.
Mm-hmm. Never leave the cave without it. But a lot of this is that even if this is by Burton's choice less connected to Batman 89, and that's something he wanted to make very clear that this was not a direct sequel to Batman 89. This was another adventure in the realm of the same character, to the point where I feel like the tagline should have been, whether you like it or not, Batman returns. So it's a good title for the movie, not Batman 2, not Batman with friends or whatever. It's Batman returns. This is another adventure in the realm of this Batman character.
Batman with friends.
Batman and friends, yes. that's the Saturday morning cartoon. It's Batman and friends.
Yeah, I mean, it just
with
made
a huggable penguin.
It just made me think of Garfield and Friends.
Yeah, exactly. Starring Christopher Walken as Nurgle.
Oh my God, I want that so much.
Wow, I'm gray. I'm the cool one. Okay, so there are one or two ties to Batman 89. When Bruce Wayne is talking to Selena Kyle, there is a brief mention of Vicky Vale, or the fact that he had a girlfriend and she's out of the picture now.
Right.
That things just essentially didn't work out in this relationship. And then also there's a line later with Bruce and Alfred about like keeping the place safe. And Bruce goes, Mr. Security, who let Vicky Vale into the Batcave? So there are some references to Batman 89 because this is the same universe and the same story, but it's not like this is what happened with Vicky Vale and we're going to move on from it because this is an arc. No, it's set dressing.
Even in Waters' early draft, Alfred brings up her name and Bruce takes an ornament from the Christmas tree with her name on it and says, Merry Christmas, Vicky, wherever the hell you are, before hurling it into the raging fireplace.
Yeah, that's a Dan Waters touch right there. That's something right out of Heather's.
Yeah, I love that. I wonder who felt pressured to make that connection, like that we had to bring up Vicky Vale.
Yeah, she's not here. He's got another romantic conquest. Why bring her up? I mean, Catwoman and Vale don't really get brought up in... Do they get brought up in Batman Forever? I wasn't paying attention for most of the romantic scenes with him and Chase Meridian because I was making fun of his lisp. But
no, I don't believe they come up.
Okay, good. Because then you can say they don't have the chronology that this movie has for the original that Burton is still trying to move on from. So it's odd.
Waters said in an interview that he said, I really didn't like Robert Wuhl's character, who's Alex Knox, the reporter guy.
Yes.
So I had a scene in my script where I had him crucified to the bat signal with his dead body flashing all over the city. And Tim made a big thing of saying, can we just pretend the first one doesn't exist? Like, let's not even address it. He was always more interested in the characters than in the action or the spectacle or even the plot, end quote. Yeah. Now, I think that's really interesting because Robert Wuhl's character was fine, But
Yeah, he's all right.
yeah, but I mean, we didn't need him for this particular story, so I'm glad that he's not there. But this is a pretty dark image here, like to have him crucified to the bat signal.
That's honestly too dark.
Yeah,
honestly.
I mean, that would be a great moment in a comic. Like that'd be a very striking image in a graphic novel, for example.
So Waters was the one that suggested the crucifixion, and then Wesley Strick was like, "No, let's not do that. Let's slay the firstborn."
Yeah,
the amount of biblical stuff that's in here is just ridiculous. And for those of you who are who wanted to see Robert Wool befall a horrifying fate, Arliss was on for 6 seasons.
Yeah, and that was always on HBO.
They were really pushing it. Yeah, the other thing when I was looking at this movie that I wanted to bring up in conversation was how many of Tim Burton's many directorial affectations are intact in this movie, like his trademark themes and people, and I wanted to just like keep track of those. So one of the obvious ones right off the bat is just the references to an early era of filmmaking, in this case German Expressionism, both in the design of Gotham and in the design of characters. It's also even more like obvious, like Max Schreck is the name of the actor who played Nosferatu in the F.W. Murnau movie.
Yes.
Willem Dafoe plays him in Shadow of the Vampire. And they do a weird fantasy sort of tinge on that production.
I really like that movie.
It's interesting. Yeah. It's very interesting. And it's something I need to rewatch one of these days, because we've been talking a lot about movies that have to do with like the making of other famous horror movies. And we're going to get to one of those in a month or so. But Shadow of the Vampire is an odd one because it also tries to be a genre movie in itself. And that's very interesting. Yeah. And also, DeVito, as Cobblepot's designed, is very clearly modeled after Dr. Caligari of Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which is a Robert Wien film that is a German Expressionist standard that I've seen like a couple times in various film classes. And it's very influential on this film, just in general, the Dutch angles and the askew set design.
Yeah. And if you haven't seen it, you can find it pretty much everywhere.
It's incredible.
But I mean, the design of the penguin, it came almost directly from a sketch that Tim Burton did. But if you watch the film, you can tell just how heavily influenced he was by Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Oh, yeah.
And even Max Schreck's hair is very reminiscent of Rotwang, the inventor from Fritz Lang's Metropolis.
Yeah. I mean, my other theory was I just showed up to set like that. That was my hair. And then they went with it.
You know, I read a quote many years ago, and I've never forgotten it. And I don't know if this is true or not, but someone had interviewed Christopher Walken, and someone asked him like how he keeps his hair looking so good. And he said that you have to brush it all the time. Like you always have to keep brushing your hair, and it just makes it soft. And he just went on and on about his hair, and I need to find that somewhere.
Do you think halfway through the cut, he's like to the production, he's like, okay, I need to take off this hair, go underneath for my actual hair, and brush the shit out of that. Cut. Sorry, Tim, I got to do this.
And it's really not all that much different from his hairpiece in Sleepy Hollow, except it's black.
Him in Sleepy Hollow. Him having weird hair in this, it reminds me, any attempt to make Christopher Walken look ridiculous when he doesn't need to. Because he does his James Bond villain, he does View to a Kill, and he's Mac Zorin in that. And then when he first hosted Saturday Night Live, he did a sketch as Mac Zorin, as a James Bond villain, and he looked completely different than he did in the film. He had like a very similar wig to this. He had an eye patch, and he was acting very differently than the actual character. He was very much a Walken character. And he's like, look, give me a second, Bond, I'm going to cut your ass in half, or just doing his usual Walken beats. And like, so you don't need to work hard to just make Walken look strange. You can bring the strange himself. He always does. One of the other people that was involved in this that Tim Burton likes to use is Danny Elfman, obviously. He's on as a composer. Again, he knocks this out to the park. Like, he's great on Burton Productions.
Yeah, and I think his score for the 1989 Batman is probably one of my all-time favorite scores. And this one, I really hadn't paid that much attention to it, but he said that whenever he was working on this movie, he said he realized that it was something more of a film score and an opera. It was 95 minutes long, twice the amount of the average film score. And under the pressure of finishing the score, the relationship between him and Burton was strained, which, along with further creative differences on The Nightmare Before Christmas, led Burton to use Howard Shore to score his next film, which was Ed Wood. And they've since reconciled, but it's worth mentioning that Tim Burton isn't solely responsible for Elfman's success as a film composer, but we'll get to that a little bit later.
Right. Now, you mentioned this earlier when we were talking about Batman 89's production designer. So he brought on Bo Welch for this one. He's done a bunch of Tim Burton films. His style is very wild and abstract. He's very good at doing worlds that are not our own and just very out there ideas. And here is definitely the case. I mean, I loved how Gotham looked in 89, but this is an even more stylized and even more specific Gotham. And the designs of the city, the designs of the aquarium and zoo that Cobblepot is a part of, they're very much Bo Welch, and they're very much well-designed and well-orchestrated. And a fun fact, he is married to another famous Burton film mainstay, Catherine O'Hara.
Yes.
So you can imagine, I just imagine Catherine O'Hara yelling, "Bo!" in her Mama Rose voice.
Hi, I'm Mama Rose. I put this on Twitter, but I've been watching Schitt's Creek, and I'm in the final season now. Yeah. And if you haven't seen it, go watch that. My God, it's so good.
Please. Catherine O'Hara is the best.
And Bo Welch also directed the live action The Cat in the Hat.
Yes.
Which...
And he was production designer. Huh?
Yeah.
But Bo Welch's direction, I think, does keep a lot of the weirdness intact.
Yeah. And as we said, like production design on the previous film was done by Anton Furst, who with the art department mixed clashing architectural styles to make Gotham City the ugliest and bleakest metropolis available. Right. He said that we imagine what New York City might look like without a planning commission, a city run by crime with a riot of architectural styles. Now, Furst and Peter Young would take home Academy Award for Best Art Direction that year. But on this one, Welch's take on Gotham is very different. And to me, it feels tidier, for lack of a better word, than the previous. It's not the rundown, crime-ridden Gotham City we see in 89. There are many more set pieces with a more thoughtful aesthetic that draws from German Expressionism, but also Art Deco and Gothicism. And at times, the scope feels larger, and at other times, smaller than Gotham City in 89. And I'm not sure whether that expansiveness comes from the story or the production design.
Maybe in world, like in between 89 and Returns, like a new politician came in to clean up the city and completely refurbish it, like the Giuliani of the Batman world. So maybe it's just Shrek. Maybe Shrek is the Giuliani of the Batman world.
Oh, wow. There's an interesting take.
Yeah, make some more comparisons in your mind. It was a tuck, I swear. What was that dripping down the side of my face? Oh, it's my blood.
So this was shot in LA on sound stages and backlights, unlike 89, which was shot in the UK, most of which I believe was at Pinewood Studios. And in both films, we have some tremendous model work and matte paintings.
Oh, yeah. This is slightly tangential, but I have a coffee table book on film special effects from like the 90s. There's a whole page, a whole spread on the way the matte work was used in Batman 89 and the way how shooting it is just the city, and they add a lot more mattes in the background and just more atmosphere and dimension to this film. And so even the mattes in this, I think, make it really work and add a lot to how this works and how this city operates.
Yeah, like one of my favorites is, well, one is like the exterior of Arctic World.
Yeah.
Like as far as like that model work there, but then also the top of the Shrek department store.
Yes.
Which definitely. Is I'm sure it's a combination of both model work and matte paintings, but it looks so great.
And in terms of thematic stuff that Burton brought to this project, two themes that come up here as well as in several other Burton films, the theme of the outcast, the societal freak getting his day, and the theme of standing in the shadows of an intimidating, at times abusive father figure. And these are in a ton of Burton films.
Yeah, like this was something that I almost wrote about for like an academic article. And I pulled out just a few little things that I had noticed in some of Tim Burton's films. Just like the recurring idea of like the weight and significance of the death of paternal figures. So like, I'll just name a few here. So Edward Scissorhands, like, you know, the creator of Edward. Big Fish, we have the dying father,
of course,
the corpse bride, which we could say like the death of the other or the self. We could also invoke Beetlejuice for that.
Yes. Batman
89, we have Wayne's parents. In Returns, we have Cobblepot's parents. In Ed Wood, we have Lugosi, the friend and mentor. Sleepy Hollow, the specter of Ichabod's bad childhood memories. I mean, we could probably draw some more connections and dig deeper here, but I mean, it's worth noting just how strongly that theme recurs in Burton's filmography.
Yeah, the one I would add in there, it doesn't involve a death, but is still a very caustic, similar parental relationship is, and I'll bring this up again, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, where Christopher Lee plays Willy Wonka's very judgmental father who keeps him in a full head brace and forbids him to eat chocolate and candies. And I love that we see him later in that film as the sort of the same dentist in the same building who becomes proud of his son despite not doing what he wanted him to do. And it's a sort of more of a lighthearted sort of abusive figure, but it's still in the same vein of a lot of these characters. And for the record, that is one of the few parts of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory that I like without being guilty about.
Well, it's interesting when you bring up keeping young Willy Wonka in that head brace. Like, it makes me think of some of these other films in which the creator or father figure kept their offspring like set apart from the world, like Edward Scissorhands, or in Sleepy Hollow. I mean, it's not necessarily Ichabod, but we see like in his memories, like his mother was kept in this Iron Maiden,
right?
Which an Iron Maiden appears in this film. It's the way that Bruce Wayne gets to the Batcave.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely something there that could be teased out.
Right. There's a lot of questions we're going to be asking about like what this movie is and what this isn't. And one of the things I wanted to figure out as we watch this was, is Batman Returns a Christmas movie? In that, not it's the same sort of argument of Die Hard. Is this the kind of thing that makes the most sense putting it around at this time of year? We are recording this in December, the time where people usually watch Christmas movies, I think, unless there's a moratorium that's been passed down to move them to July. But I wanted to at least make it like, you know, is this a Christmas movie as I was running down? And setting this at Christmas certainly helps. I mean, the opening set piece of this film completely undoes the long Halloween overtones of most other Batman films. Like there's completely snow-covered sets, full Christmas overtones and trees. And this is what makes the eventual attack by the circus gang in the opening set piece even more exciting, because their skull and fire motifs completely contrast with the snow and merriment of Christmas.
Yeah, not just the fact that this is taking place around Christmas. Like, I mean, they make a big deal of it, like the tree lighting ceremony and the relighting ceremony.
Yes.
You know, it's like it's so big that there's a political challenge to do it over again. And like I said earlier, like the original script had that as part of the climax.
There is a lot of Christmassy elements in this movie. I mean, as Bruce and Selina have a conversation in town, "Oh, Come All Ye Faithful" plays in the background. A big plot point about Bruce and Selina is mistletoe, and it's how they figure out their own secret identities.
Yeah.
The big ball that comes in late that Max Schreck throws is a Christmas party, a masquerade ball kind of thing.
Right.
And even the ending is very Christmassy. Like it's a Merry Christmas. Like, I forget exactly the dialogue that goes out, but it's a very Christmassy sort of way of ending the piece.
Yeah, yeah. As like Bruce Wayne is in the car, it's in like a Rolls Royce,
yes.
And Alfred is driving, and Alfred says, "Merry Christmas, Mr. Wayne." Bruce says, "Merry Christmas, Alfred. Goodwill toward men,
yes,
and women."
Yes,
like that's a stellar way to end this. And the original script, I'm going to keep talking about it. I'm sorry.
Yes,
but
no, of course.
Alfred says, "Merry Christmas." And the last line of the movie is Bruce Wayne saying, "Sure."
Well, there's that zeal he's known for. But honestly, I do consider this a Christmas movie. I do think this is a holiday watch more, I think, than Die Hard is, honestly. What's your take on this as a Christmas movie, or if it isn't, or whatever? I
mean, I would just say yes.
Yes.
To me, like, this is the epitome of like it's not even like Christmas adjacent. You know, like it's definitely a part of the story. The action and drama is unfolding around it. And I feel like it would have to be considered a Christmas movie.
Yeah.
All right. As if we hadn't talked about this script enough, let's talk about Batman Returns as a Dan Waters script.
Right. And we've had a lot of fun talking about Dan Waters' script, thanks to Hudson Hawk.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've become more of an aficionado in his writing in terms of after Heathers and this. And Selina Kyle is definitely a Dan Waters character. All of her talking to self stuff from the first couple scenes that we see her in her apartment, it fits right in with the sort of cosmic dread of a lot of his Heathers characters. Like that whole scene in her apartment as she's answering her messages and we see her neon sign that I love.
Oh, yeah, the hello there.
Yeah, hello there, or hell here, or whatever. Even if some of the dialogue was spruced by Wesley Strick, this is still very much in line with Heathers and Hudson Hawk and a lot of his snippy, sort of cynical characters that he loves writing. And occasionally you catch a pure Waters line in the wild, like I want to play an integral part of his degradation that sneaks through.
Yeah, there are a few gems in terms of the dialogue in this film.
Oh, yeah.
Waters said about Selina Kyle, he said, quote, Sam Hamm went back to the way comic books in general treat women, like fetishy sexual fantasy. I wanted to start off just at the lowest point in society, a very beaten down secretary, end quote. And just to kind of punctuate where he was going, I added this at the last
We can
minute.
both see this coming.
Yeah, but just to give you an idea of how Waters was situating this character in the early draft, here's a line. So just to set it up, in the conference room at Shrek's department store, like in the top in the conference room, everyone's telling Selina their coffee order. And Max says, Selina, go away. Do not fret, gentlemen. If our meeting goes well, I'll let you watch me spank her. What?
If our meeting goes well, Spanky Poo. Come on. We got to.
My jaw hit the floor when I read that.
Did Waters know he was writing for Walken when he said that?
I wonder, but I mean, even though we don't have that in the finished film,
Thank God.
we can, yeah, but we learned something very early on about Max as a character, but also like what I'm trying to say here, like what Waters is trying to set up in terms of how these people treat women. And which makes sense because she has this great resurgence or transformation where she takes ownership of her femininity, you know?
Yeah.
And so I don't know, I want to talk about that a little bit more later, but I think we get the inklings of that here, although it's a very risque line.
Definitely. The theme of commercialism is also very strong here as Shrek's capitalist ravings make him a villain to Selina Kyle, the little guy, in the little he cares for the common person. This goes back to Hudson Hawk and the Mayflowers' constant consumerist outlook on life.
Yeah, and as you'd mentioned earlier, like the first draft of Waters' script opened with the Batman logo and then pulling out and you realize you're in a merchandising store for Batman.
Right.
And he says after that, a grenade gets thrown in, the place blows up. And he had originally had more elements of Batman being commodified and hated being treated like a celebrity. But he says that Tim Burton found that stuff a little bit too much. But I do like the pervasiveness of like this consumerism, like in whenever Selina checks her messages after she's been pushed out the window, it's this ad for Gotham City perfume, which nods to that consumerism embedded in this take on Gotham.
Yes.
You know, and we'll talk more about that scene later. You know, and of course, having Shrek's department store, like, you know, he's kind of this big wig. There's definitely some leftover or some residual stuff there from the Mayflowers and Hudson Hawk.
Oh, definitely. And also talking about Hudson Hawk, the fates of both the Penguin and Max Shrek seem unseasonably dark and right up Waters' alley, which matches a lot of those sort of gruesome fates we see in Hudson Hawk, like the two goons who get shot and say their own names, and the gold-plated massacre at the end of that.
Right.
Although, and this is another big controversial part of this thing, the scene where Bruce Wayne takes a bomb and shoves it in a goon's pants and smiles as it goes off. I wasn't sure if that was him or Wesley Strix doing.
Yeah, it appears to be Waters. Like this is from that May 91 draft, then simply titled Batman 2. So it says, the tattooed strong man stops laughing when he looks down and sees that Batman has attached the maniac's bomb to the not so strong man's leopard skin. The tattooed strong man squeals past Batman right into an open manhole. An explosion geysers out of it. Now, what I found interesting here was that like this implies that it was supposed to be like a Chaplin gag or a cartoon gag. Like a man, imagine like a man walks down the street, sees a banana peel on the ground, sidesteps it, clearly proud of himself for avoiding that catastrophe before walking straight into an open manhole. You know, that kind of comedy. But really, this could be a strict thing as it appears in the movie, since Batman actually tosses him in. But, you know, Batman still kills him, but, you know. Waters had a few things to say about Strick here. He said, quote, after I went on and did other movies, I came to realize that for another writing coming in, Wesley Strick protected so much of my stuff. He did, however, bring in a lot of pop culture references that I had tried to keep out of the movie. There's a love connection joke that I can't stand. There's a Geraldo reference and a Norman Bates reference that I don't like. He also added all the stuff about the firstborn sons of Gotham City in the list of names. Penguin just being a disgruntled bad guy who wanted to get back at the city was good enough for me. Tim didn't really have any feelings one way or the other about such things, end quote. Which I found it interesting that he was so averse to these pop culture references.
Yeah, he did a lot of them in other scripts.
Yeah.
Did he just think they didn't fit in Batman?
I don't know. I mean, and I have this later in my notes, but I feel like maybe since the world in which this is set is anachronistic, that perhaps he was worried about dating the movie.
Yes, because it's very old-fashioned in a lot of senses.
Waters also said that Sam Hamm got story credit merely for the fact that he had Catwoman and Penguin in his script. He said, my script had completely different conceptions of the characters. When we were trying to come up with Penguin's story, I came up with the idea that everybody was shredding papers in the Wall Street offices, and he's down in the sewer taping them all back together. I thought that was really cool.
That would have been really cool, yeah.
And he also said that I personally like a little more plot, and it was just after the LA riot, so I like the element of a politician starting a riot to help him get the incumbent out of office. So I had this political satire of Penguin running for mayor, which I think Tim could have cared less about, end quote.
He still sells it. I mean, Tim really seems to relish that sort of subplot in this movie. And
yeah, I mean, I think, like, to me, I like that he was riffing off of some of the stuff that was going on in the real world at the time.
Yeah.
Like he was trying to harness that and interpret that in some way. Like, I think that shows what a gifted writer Waters is, that he's able to kind of tap into those things, which I think is the mark of any great screenwriter.
Yeah, definitely.
Like who can do it well without it being too obvious, I think.
Yeah. And going back to his other work and Heather's, the bonkers, almost correct quality of both villains, in the sense they're clearly villains, but we understand why they want what they want, is definitely a Waters theme, going back to JD and Heather's, which one of those great cinematic characters, even if he is kind of insane by the end.
Right. Oh, a little side note here. Waters did revisions to the script for Demolition Man. It was a 2-week rewrite, and he was responsible for adding the bit with the 3 seashells. So
yes, there you go. It's the best part of that. Well, that's one of the best part of that movie. That movie's great.
Yeah, he said in an interview that he was on the phone with a friend who was in the bathroom at the time, and the friend was like, "Hey, can I call you back?" And Waters is just like, "Okay, give me some futuristic bathroom stuff." And he's like, "Well, I don't know. I got some seashells in my bathroom." And so that's reportedly where that came from. So in a 2016 interview, Waters says about getting involved in the movie, quote, "It did help that Denise Denovi, the producer of Heathers, was at the time Tim Burton's producer. I had met Tim earlier when I pitched him a sequel to Beetlejuice. It was a casual, half-assed meeting where I talked about Beetlejuice working with the first family in the White House. Tim was mildly amused. We did get along and get each other's sense of humor. Both Tim and I were like, yeah, Batman, he's interesting. I like that Dark Knight Returns that Frank Miller did. And the movie inspires anger from true Batman fans to this day. I have a friend who is a big comic book fan, and he says to me, yeah, Batman Returns, it's a great movie for people who hate Batman. It's a little harsh, but I can see what he means in that the film was a Tim Burton film and not a Batman film," which I thought was a really interesting take, and I wanted to see what you thought about that.
I mean, I agree with it. I think that because Tim Burton is so sequel averse, he wanted to make a story with a whole new batch of characters and have Batman sort of be in it, but nothing in Batman's character is especially progressed. He is basically set dressing in his own movie.
Yes.
He's still the hero of the film. He saves the day, but he still comes between both Catwoman and the Penguin, and it's basically their story for the most of the film, even if Batman is still bouncing off of it. So
yeah, I agree. I like that he kind of falls away like from the story to a degree, so that we can focus more on like the newer characters that we have in this one compared to 89. So yeah, I mean, you can definitely tell that he was much more interested in exploring that than just doing the first one over again.
Right.
They're just doing a retread.
Exactly. I don't think Burton likes doing retreads, although even his Dumbo remake isn't exactly a retread. Even his Planet of the Apes is a complete new. He doesn't like doing the same thing over and over again and doing exact remakes or retellings. He likes having creative license.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I like about Burton, is that you can tell he is very interested in fully exploring like wherever his muse or whatever takes him, like wherever his creative ambitions decide to carry him, not just get stuck in the Hollywood machine of just churning out a product.
Yeah, he's very calculated in that respect, and that is something to really enjoy about his stuff.
Waters said too, He said that it's a great misfit movie. The popular kids and the jocks love Christopher Nolan's Batman movies, but the really downtrodden, quirky, and imaginative kids growing up love Batman Returns.
Yes, and they also love Heathers.
Yes.
So
it was funny. Like in that same interview, he said that he was at a screening or a Q&A at least with Christopher Nolan talking about one of the Batman films. And he was just in the audience. Someone asked him about what he thought of the 89 Batman. He said, I think it's a wonderful movie. And then someone asked about Batman Returns, and he said, well, I think the first one was a great movie. And so he didn't really, have much to say about it. But Waters was like, I don't know, he sounded a little miffed in the interview. Yeah. But I think Waters knows, or he can appreciate what Nolan has done for a contemporary audience.
Oh, yeah, because I love his Batman movies, all three of them.
If you've always wanted to get your hands on Batman, drop into McDonald's, where Batman Returns is on a dramatic series of 32-ounce collector cups with fine, crispy Bat Disc lids straight from the movie. You can pick up a large drink in one of 6 superhero collector cups at a special price when you buy any extra value meal, because what you want is what you get at McDonald's today.
All right, so let's talk about some of the acting, some of this character work here. Let's start off with Michael Keaton as Batman. So Keaton earned $11 million for reprising his role as the Caped Crusader. And in my personal opinion, Keaton is one of the few actors who does well as both Batman and Bruce Wayne, although perhaps better at the latter.
I mean, because he's better at doing the sort of charming, sort of there's something not all there sort of regular person. He's a very intimidating Batman, although I think that Christian Bale's Batman is a little better.
He's not quite the Gotham playboy Bruce Wayne we get in future iterations of the character. But, one thing I do like about him is that he brings some of his comedic chops to the role, and not just through dialogue, like meeting Selina for the first time in Shrek's office, or that moment wherever he and Alfred are talking about Vicky Vale and, you're the one who let her into the Batcave. Oh, hi, Vic, come on in.
I just remember one of the moments, because he was going to win Best Actor for Birdman, and then he loses to Eddie Redmayne, and then Birdman wins Best Picture, and I think the producer of Birdman says, I also want to thank Michael Keaton. They were basically saying, he got robbed, essentially, and Michael Keaton just leans into the mic and goes, guys, I'm just happy to be here, which is very much him. He doesn't turn off like that. Yeah,
I remember I saw a few years ago, there was a commencement speech he did, and he ends it with, I'm Batman. And I just screamed. I was like, that would just got me so excited. And I believe, I don't know if this is still happening, but he's coming back to reprise the role, like in the Flash movie.
Yeah, I think in the next Flash movie, he's going to try and do like a Bruce Wayne and Batman Beyond sort of thing, where he's the older Bruce Wayne. I'm not sure if that Flash movie is going to happen, because it's been in development for 5 years, but it'd be nice if it did.
So what about Michelle Pfeiffer as Selina Kyle?
Okay. So first of all, I just want to make sure this is clear. Michelle Pfeiffer was not the first choice for Selina Kyle by the producers. There is a whole laundry list of actresses who were considered for Catwoman. Here's the cliff notes. Sean Young really wanted the role. She wanted the role in Batman 89 as Vicky Vale. She didn't get that. She doesn't get this one either. She pursues multiple producers in a homemade Catwoman suit, which freaks them out and does not help her case whatsoever. The role of Catwoman goes to Annette Bening. If she hadn't gotten pregnant, she would have played Catwoman, but life happens, and so Michelle Pfeiffer was next in line.
Michelle Pfeiffer's career was really hot at this time. She had done Scarface, Lady Hawk, The Witches of Eastwick, Married to the Mob, Fabulous Baker Boys, and she rode high up until around 2001, 2002, and she would work again with Burton on Dark Shadows.
Yeah, of course.
She was paid $3 million, which was $2 million more than what was offered to Annette Bening.
Oh, gosh.
And to prepare for the role, Pfeiffer attended kickboxing classes and practiced handling a whip. In an interview from earlier this year, October 2020, Pfeiffer revealed that she keeps the whip in her closet.
Oh, that's nice. She still has that prop from the film. That's awesome.
Yeah, and it was great because she was like, oh, yeah, it's in my closet. Do you want me to take it out? And so she just went and got her whip.
Yeah, I do have a very niche music fun fact, because in the singer Vance Joy, who's an Australian singer, he had a hit with the song Riptide, which is an alt-rock hit, which is a very cool song. He said that this movie in particular inspired him to write the lyric in the song, I swear she's destined for the screen, closest thing to Michelle Pfeiffer that you've ever seen. So not any other movie in particular. I think he was mostly referring to Batman Returns. So that's cool. And I can see why.
And as great as this cast is, like Pfeiffer steals the show and how she can play timid, confident, and intimidating. And she really gets to show off her range here. And I think Waters' love for the character gives her that room in the script to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to throw this out there. What do you think about Batman Returns as a feminist movie, in part?
I think it pretty much works. I mean, look, a lot of this Catwoman part is basically sort of absorbing the camp undertones of this script. A lot of it is digging into the sort of stereotypical femme fatale kind of nth degree woman who kills men kind of thing. But at the same time, it is a very freeing role of a woman who gets to take back against every guy who's ever screwed with them or ever done something wrong. And so it is, while a very over the top way of getting back at this, it is a very therapeutic sort of feminist ideology coming from here. I will say the only time where the script falls out of line with like the correct feminist way of going through is the read that Michelle Pfeiffer has on the line, "Life's a bitch and now so am I." Yeah. That sounds like a Wesley Strick line that could have been right out of the comics that does not fit with how Michelle Pfeiffer is playing it. And I think she knows she's better than it.
Yeah, I can see that.
But for the most part, this is a very good pro-feminism, pro-women taking it back kind of movie, even if it does have to be very big to do so.
Yeah, and whenever we get to the key scenes section of the show, I want to come back to that because I had a few thoughts on that too.
Okay. Cool.
But let's move on to Danny DeVito as Oswald Cobblepot.
Yes.
Dustin Hoffman was originally the first choice to play the Penguin, but he declined.
Okay.
And apart from Hoffman, and I don't know, this is according to various sources, but Marlon Brando, John Candy, Bob Hoskins, and Christopher Lloyd were all considered.
Fish, you can't refuse. I can't do a Brando.
But I mean, can you imagine like Christopher Lloyd in this role? Come on.
Christopher Lloyd, I think, is along the same lines of Danny DeVito in that they can do that sort of character performance. Matter of fact, Christopher Lloyd and Danny DeVito were both in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest together. So they go way back.
Yeah, and they worked together on Taxi.
Yes, they did. I should have also said that.
But on this casting, so Waters said that he kind of knew that DeVito was going to play the Penguin. He said they didn't really have it nailed down, like the casting. He said for a short, nasty little guy, it's a short list. And he says that he ended up writing the character for DeVito.
Well, seeing as there's another famous short, nasty part that Danny DeVito was supposed to do, Wallace Shawn could have also done it.
Inconceivable.
That's the one story from Princess Bride. The entire bit of filming, Wallace Shawn was looking around his shoulder, thinking that at any second they'd fire him and replace him with Danny DeVito because that was apparently the first choice.
Really?
So,
I didn't know that.
Yes, exactly. And for those of you who are big fans of Princess Bride, read Carrie Elwes's book on the subject as you wish. It's fantastic.
Oh, I have it. I haven't read it yet, but it's on my short list to read next year.
I read it a couple of years ago on a day where I had jury duty, and it's a very nice read. I enjoyed the heck out of it. Okay, so Danny DeVito's Penguin makeup in this, it was purposely shielded from any leaks to fans. No one knew what the Penguin would look like in this movie until promotional materials allowed for it. Even Danny DeVito was forbade from letting anyone, even his family, know what the costume and makeup even looked like. And DeVito would also stay in character for most of the shoot, and he would let the arduous makeup process wash away by showing full-length films in his trailer as the makeup would put on, usually behind him so he could see it in the mirror. So that's at least one way of staying light on his feet as it happened.
Yeah, and I think his performance as this is probably one of my favorites of his. His and Jack the Bear is probably my second, but what are some of your favorite performances of DeVito's?
I would say Matilda is very high up on the list. I would say his performance in Man on the Moon, I think, is pretty high up there. Yeah. I think just from a nostalgia standpoint, he was wonderful in Hercules as Philoctetes. I like him as well as a director, as well as an actor. I mean, I think his direction on Throw Mama from the Train and Matilda is fantastic, and he could really do well in things like that. Yeah, very versatile, and also he's from New Jersey, so I have some bias there.
Somewhere, it's either in the script or the movie novelization, but it's implied that the Penguin found and murdered his parents prior to his resurgence that we get. And this isn't addressed in the film, of course, and I don't think we even need it. But I don't know, do you have any feelings about that?
Well, what other purpose would it give? I mean, where would it go in the film? What would it provide that the film doesn't already provide arc-wise and theme-wise? Like it's enough that we have them abandon him at the end and go about the rest of their lives and die. That's enough, I think.
Yeah, because as soon as the main titles are over, like we get that little title card that this is 33 years later. So we know that there's a substantial amount of time has passed. So that, and if we can only go by the makeup for Paul Rubens and Diane Salinger.
Right.
But we could say, they just died of old age.
Probably.
And we do get that line, I'm not a human being, I'm an animal, which is an inversion of a line from John Merrick in The Elephant Man. And I like how the film subtly plays with that idea of like questioning one's humanity, like especially through Oswald's character. When up to that point, he's using pathos to paint himself as this tragic and sympathetic victim of society. But in your opinion, how much of that do you think is just manipulation, since we later learn he's on a revenge kick to murder, the firstborn sons of Gotham?
Well, I mean, not much of it. I mean, I don't think he's one of those characters that thinks that far ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's very more emotionally based, and I think he definitely is more of a momentary sort of this is how I'm feeling right now, and if you don't like it, then I'm going to go and do all these. I don't think he's going for a long game manipulation.
Yeah, because he does have that moment where we go from him telling the press that I'm a man, I have a name, and all that, and then later in a fit of rage, he exclaims that he's not a human being, he's an animal. So like just that things haven't been going according to his plan, that he regresses isn't the right word, but he was aspiring to become something better than he thought he was, and then
but he stops himself essentially.
Right.
By not changing.
Yeah, but it's like, and I think in his mind, it's not his fault. Like it's the circumstances. And again, he's becoming a victim here. And so he is exploding into this and coming unglued and reverting back to what he's always thought he was, but should be better than, if that makes sense. Like where he's lived his life as the subhuman person, and he wants to, to cast that identity aside. Here, towards the end, he reverts back to that.
Yeah,
I guess he just accepts that in his mind that this is who I am. I am just the freak that I've always been.
Exactly.
And one thing that I noticed was that Tucker, Oswald's father, is seen wearing a monocle and using a cigarette holder, much like the Penguin character that we know from the comics and TV show. And we later see Oswald using a monocle when he's writing, when he's making his little list, but he spits out the cigarette holder when the campaign people thrust it in his mouth, telling him to claim his birthright. Yeah, and he has both in the promotional materials for the film because, hey, they have to shout at us that this is the Penguin. But I found that rejection of that cigarette holder interesting. Like these are the trappings of his father, and so he wouldn't want those things.
It's both the trappings of his father and the trappings of his comics persona. It's a meta moment almost. It's almost a true believer moment. So, no, I'm surprised I missed that.
And just a few other things, like just how childlike the Penguin character can be at times. Like when he's using that supermarket Batmobile, to control Batman's Batmobile, and the repurposed Duckmobile from Arctic World, his little onesie he wears.
Yeah.
And the fascination with umbrellas, especially that one that's adorned with children's toys.
Yeah.
And even just the plot to kill the firstborn sons, which are children, not the firstborn adult sons, by dumping them into toxic sewage, cast out, very much like he was.
Right.
I feel like there's probably something to that as well.
Yeah, it's something owing to his own psychological stunting and, lengthened childhood where he had to sort of fend for himself. And it's led to just an increased unrealistic sort of view of adulthood. And it's again, there's a whole psychological perspective that I could go into if I had more time. But
yeah, I mean, because he was essentially raised by this troop of circus people, the Red Triangle Gang.
Yeah. All right.
Jordan, are you ready for this? Let's talk about Christopher Walken as Max Schreck.
Exactly. Oh my.
So according to casting director Marion Doherty, Burton was initially hesitant to cast Walken as Shrek on the basis that the actor scared him. And like I said, they would, of course, work together again on Sleepy Hollow.
Exactly. I think the actor scaring him in that point, worked. He's like, oh, we want him to scare me. Because, he would just go, for the whole movie. So, yeah. I laughed so hard the first time I saw that. It was just Walken going, ah!
Yeah.
It was so damn funny. Does Walken fit in this movie to you? I mean, because to me, he does for the most part. Because some reads have a bit too much rasp on them. Like, that's the one thing he does in a lot of his early 80s and 90s movies that, yeah, you like that. Just a lot of that.
Yeah,
but
that whole, Something like when you tell Selena, like, how did you get to the protected files? Might I ask? But to me, he's on the surface more comical than menacing, but he's writing a very, very fine line. And I think that's why the character works so well for me.
Yeah.
And also, like, it doesn't get any better than him offering Oswald free poontang.
Because who wants to pay? To me, Walken is a perfect contrast to all three leads. He supplies great menace without being too ridiculous, and he knows what the character needs and knows how much of himself to keep intact playing Max Schreck. He can do the sort of villain stuff like he was doing in View to a Kill, but he can just ramp it up, and he can still provide enough, like the yawn that he does when he's talking to Bruce at the party is very much Walken. It's very him.
Yeah. Even like the thing motivating him, it's to get the current mayor out of the way so that he can build this power plant to suck the electricity out of Gotham City and store it, which feels very like 66 Batman or just shy of a Bond villain's idea of a good time.
It's very similar to his plan in View to a Kill of completely reclaiming the Silicon Valley energy and like planning an earthquake and a fault cave-in California and fucking up through that. Although this one, I think, if you can believe it, has less Nazis.
Just a few.
Yeah, just a few Nazis running around in View to a Kill.
Well, I said earlier, there wasn't quite as much menace as it was comedy for his character. But I think one thing that I've really latched on to, like in preparing for the show, was this deeply seated nastiness about him. And like at first, Selena is so meaningless to him that when he finds himself without his speech, he tells Chip to remind him to fire that what's her name.
Yeah.
And that's also how she sees herself. Because when they have that little moment before he pushes her out the window, she says, how can you be so cruel to someone so meaningless? and not only is that a great line, but it dawned on me, like, that's just how she sees herself in this moment. And this is what she's going to be rejecting later. And just that explosive nature of her rage and what gets her on this path for revenge is so warranted. And I feel like Max Schreck is a much worse person than the Penguin, or rather we, the audience, should want to see Schreck get his due much more so than the Penguin.
Exactly.
And then we've got Michael Goff as Alfred Pennyworth.
He's the best movie Alfred. Just putting that out there.
He is. He's great. And he was such a sport. Like he used to do those Diet Coke commercials. with
Another Diet Coke, Master Wayne.
Yeah. Along with Pat Hingle, like he was one of the few actors who appeared in all four of the initial Batman film series.
Welcome in all of them.
Yeah. And he would also come back to work with Burton again on Sleepy Hollow. I think that was his last film before he passed.
I think so, yeah. Because he would pass, I think, sometime in the 2000s.
Yeah. And I was so glad to see him again.
Yeah, of course.
And I think, if I remember correctly, on the commentary for Sleepy Hollow, Tim Burton said that like he wanted to cast him as Alfred because he had seen him in Horrors of the Black Museum and Conga.
Oh, okay.
And so I think Tim Burton had already been a fan. And I think that's why he's been a part of the franchise. And I love his dry humor. And the moments that he and Keaton have, like particularly the scene about the vichyssoise, like the soup that's served cold.
Yes, that's great.
It's like, it's cold. It's vichyssoise, sir. It's supposed to be cold.
It's great.
It's great. And again, just a great moment with Keaton because just how he's using those comedic chops that we talked about.
Exactly. And just some other random notes I have on the actors and the performance of this movie. Was Andrew Berniarski trying to do a Walken impression as Chip? Because some lines really sounded like it.
When I rewatched it, I can definitely hear it.
Yes.
Because when he comes in before they go down for Max to give his speech, he says something about going and being with the masses or something. And Dad, save yourself. And just all that sort of stuff. Like you can hear it. Like it's subtle, but I think he's definitely trying to do Walken impression.
Oh, God, yeah. It's not very subtle at all. Speaking of not very subtle, Vincent Schiavelli really fits in this movie. It's weird because he's one of the most interesting, hard to classify character actors there are. Mm-hmm. Like when he shows up in something like, oh God, it's him. Like he's in, the first time I saw him he was in Tomorrow Never Dies.
Yes.
And he was a villain in that. And he had a very fun, goofy sort of role as a torturer type. And he was very funny.
Yeah, he had previously co-starred with DeVito in several episodes of Taxi.
Yes, they knew each other well.
Yeah, and they would work together again in Man on the Moon. And I told you this earlier, but when I was a kid, I thought this was Bram from Sharon Lois and Bram. And let me know if you guys remember this, but it was like this trio who had this musical kids show with an actor in an elephant costume. And I think it was a Canadian show, but there's some resemblance. I can see it now, but really they just have the same beard.
Man, I don't think Vincent Schiavelli gets being compared to an elephant very often. But, yeah.
But Schiavelli, he's intimidating and he's great at shouting and being scary.
Oh God, yeah, he did a lot of that in Ghost as well. So of course he gets to do that. Another character actor in this, Jan Hooks. It always surprised me because I forgot Jan Hooks was in this, and she brought a lot to her minute of screen time. But I feel like that role could have been played by just about anybody because she's a really dynamic character actress doing SNL for God knows how many years.
Yeah.
And she deserved better than doing bit roles like this.
Yeah, I think she was on SNL for about 5 years.
Yeah, 5 or 6 years, yeah.
Yeah, and she started her career as a member of the Groundlings in L.A., like Paul Rubens. And you've probably seen her in Pee-wee's Big Adventure as the Alamo tour guide.
Yeah, of course. That's. I think that might have been where I knew her first, other than on The Simpsons, because she plays Apu's wife she played Apu's wife on The Simpsons, Mangela. So,
okay.
Yeah. But yeah, and speaking of Pee-wee's Big Adventure, we did talk about Paul Rubens and Diane Salinger a little.
Yeah, Paul Rubens and Diane Salinger, Pee-wee Herman and Simone from Pee-wee's Big Adventure. They appear as Oswald's parents during the prologue, like we said. And Rubens later would reprise his role as the Penguin's father in the 2016 second season of Gotham, those in a different continuity. But a side note here, in case you listeners didn't know this, I think this is the coolest thing. According to one historian, Cassine Gaines, Jim Henson's daughter, who was a studio executive in the mid-'80s, told Paul Rubens about Burton's short film Frankenweenie because Rubens was shopping for a director for Pee-wee's Big Adventure. And the studio at the time, I forgot who it was, but they're like, yeah, this is the guy who's going to direct your movie. And Paul Rubens, being the kind of guy that he is, was like, no, this is not the right guy. And so he was still shopping around, asking everybody for recommendations. And he remembers it being someone different who told him. But anyway, Burton was working as an animator at Disney at the time. Rubens got Burton on board for Big Adventure. And when he was looking for a composer, Rubens thought, oh, Tim and I both like Oingo Boingo. Let's reach out to their front man, Danny Elfman, who, when they approached him, was like, I don't score films, but I'll write you a song. And Elfman told his agent about this. And the agent was like, are you really going to say no to this?
Yes.
And then the rest is history.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to read more about this, go check out Inside Pee-wee's Playhouse, the untold, unauthorized, and unpredictable story of a pop phenomenon by Cassine Gaines. I just finished it last week, and it's a quick and interesting read, but it's interesting to think about what Paul Rubens did to kind of help kickstart Tim Burton and Danny Elfman's careers.
Yeah, and again, like the whole dichotomy of Pee-wee's Playhouse and just the amount of very interesting and famous people that have been involved in that show and that inception is very cool. You get names like Phil Hartman as Papa Merks and
Lawrence
Fishburne,
yeah.
The very, very strange George McGrath, who I know from Whose Line, being one of the few people that has complained. No, that's another story.
Let's talk about...
Oh, yeah. This is the big question.
Yeah, this is a big question here. So is this movie too dark?
I mean, look, I took notes on as I watched this of the moments that if I was a frequently insulted parent in the 90s, what I would dislike in this. So obviously there's the scene that we mentioned earlier where Batman throws dynamite down the goon's pass, smiles and runs as he blows up. And people argued this is not normal behavior for Batman, not especially known for killing. And I do see Burton's point. It's a quick gag and it subvert expectations.
Yeah, same for that clown devil dude that Batman murders with fire.
Exactly. It's just, this is the warfare he has to get to in order to get through these guys. One of the themes of this movie is the perception of a hero or a figure and how it can be altered. And Batman becomes a malicious figure thanks to the framing attempt by the Penguin, speeds into traffic, allegedly endangers the life of the tree lighting girl, and heeds into the public's deepest fears about himself.
Yeah, I mean, this idea is played with a bit in Nolan's trilogy, perhaps with a little bit more depth and nuance, like with Harvey Dent becoming Gotham's White Knight and keeping Batman as this troublesome vigilante. And before 2016, I wouldn't have believed that a man or a penguin who acts like this would have a shot at public office. But what's also interesting is how absent the police are. Like, we don't need them for the story, really, but because they're not in play, there's no buffer between the upper echelon of Gotham's governing body and its criminals or even its citizens. And it's just interesting how much of like GCPD would play more into future films and the graphic novels and Gotham, the TV show.
Yeah, they're all over the Nolan films.
Yeah.
There's a lot of big cops characters, and even Dark Knight Rises, which the Dark Knight, which deals into police corruption, and the Dark Knight Rises, which has Matthew Modine's sort of character that refuses to really like move and go anything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like what you said about the Penguin, not just framing Batman and trying to discredit him, but for him to ascend the ranks and not just become a hero, but become this public figure, this icon that represents Gotham City.
Exactly.
And so, I don't know, yeah, it's curious how this movie is already starting to play with that idea a little bit.
Right. And I already mentioned the slaying of the firstborns bits, which it's slightly excessive to me. And we mentioned the eventual fates of Shrek and the Penguin, Shrek being electrocuted and us seeing a couple seconds long shot of his hideously deformed and electrocuted husk. And,
yeah,
and the Penguin just succumbing to the nuclear waste poisoning in the rivers and keeling over. As
black bile is gushing from his mouth.
That disgusted me as a kid, but it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this movie, it generated quite a bit of controversy about it being too dark for children, even by 1992 standards. Is it, though? I mean, I think the distinction we need to make is between what is dark and what is grotesque.
Right.
Like, I think the imagery could be a little much for young kids, like the creepy clowns on stilts and
the walking husk. Yeah.
Yeah, and the skulls with oogly eyes on motorcycles. Like, that shit scared me as a kid. Yeah, I mean, I can see why this was a conversation, but I think overall, I don't think it's quite that dark.
No, it's not like people are getting machine gunned and we see the blood coming out. It's still a fairly safe film, but it just has some moments of the director just being like Sam Raimi would do this in the Spider-Man movies.
Right.
Like, you can never really stop a horror movie director from being themselves. And there would be moments in Spider-Man 1 and 2 where you just see grotesque imagery and the Green Goblin doing various things.
Right. Conversely, like, it's not all doom and gloom. Like, there's a lot of camp and goofiness in this movie.
Yes.
Like that Penguin supermarket Batmobile I talked about, or Bruce Wayne scratching that CD recording of the Penguin.
Yes.
And the CD player has a Bat logo on it.
Of course it does.
And like I said, that monkey takes that note to the Penguin. It's on Batman branded stationery. So, and hell, even that power plant plot and that pitiful looking architectural model in his office. Like, it's not, like I said, it's not all dark. So, in your opinion, is the film tonally uneven or is it balanced?
No, to me, it's pretty balanced. To me, it knows pretty much what it wants to be, and it stays like that. It's not like it's jarringly, we're going to do this, and now we're going to do this. It's still on the same page for most of the film, and I think all the writers were congruent enough to keep the film the same sort of gothic, semi-dark, but mostly still Batman kind of feel.
That's where I feel like the conversation or the argument that this film is dark falls apart, in that this film is not just like punctuated by these campier moments, but it makes up a large part of the pie.
Right.
And it's interwoven throughout the entire film. And I mean, at this time, RoboCop was already out and they were selling those toys to kids.
Yeah.
So and Beetlejuice, there were Beetlejuice action figures. Like, I mean, granted, Beetlejuice isn't that dark, but I'm saying that, right. Yeah, I mean, I'm saying that there were many films out there already that children were watching that were definitely not meant for kids, but were marketed towards kids. And you're pointing the finger at Batman Returns. And I don't know, to me, that just seems...
it's a scapegoat.
It's a scapegoat, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. By now, you pretty much have had to have heard that the summer's big movie is Batman Returns. In its first couple of weeks, it has already grossed more than $100 million at the box office, and it is already creating controversy. Some parents contend that Batman Returns, which is rated PG-13, is actually being marketed for younger children, and the movie is just too violent. Let's get an expert opinion on that from USA Today's junior movie critic, 10-year-old Danny Slasky. Please welcome Danny. So, Danny, what did you think of the movie?
It was very violent. It was a total attack against kids, the whole movie. Everything that kids love was being used against them.
Like what?
Clowns Even the Penguin had a ducky boat.
So
and
things that kids could identify
presents and mobiles. All that type of stuff we're using to hurt kids and capture kids. Penguin's total goal was to hurt kids.
You think it was scary then?
Definitely for kids.
Yeah, for you?
I was actually a little bit scared, and I have never been scared of a movie like this before.
Yeah.
I came out of Terminator 2, fine.
Yeah. What do you think about the possibility of younger kids seeing this movie? You're 10, and it frightened you.
It's just not for younger kids. Penguin always had goop coming out of his mouth. Catwoman took her claws and played tic-tac-toe on a man's face. It was just so violent for kids. And with all the McDonald's toys, it's making it sound like it is for kids, and it's not.
Jesus. All right, Jordan, tell us a little bit about some of the pop music in this film.
Yeah, I like that this has become a feature of these where I get to talk about actual uses of pop music because I like music. So this is the one, like, of the 4 John Peters Batman movies. Batman Returns doesn't have a big soundtrack or a signature song to it. Hold on. Don't turn this off, Jack. I'm going to get to it. Batman 89 had Prince do the entire soundtrack. Batman Forever and Batman and Robin had huge inspired by soundtracks that had a lot of people throwing in songs they were using or covers or whatever. Those are both very cool. And the closest thing this movie has to a big song is, yes, Face to Face by Susie and the Banshees, which plays during the masquerade ball scene. And I don't think it was pushed as hard in terms of a promotional circuit as Prince's Bat Dance or Seal's Kiss from a Rose, or even Smashing Pumpkins' The End is the Beginning is the End.
Right, yeah.
This is more of a minor sort of throw it out because Susie and the Banshees is not as big of a name as Prince or Seal or the Smashing Pumpkins were in those time periods. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Susie Sue and the Banshees. I love that sort of whale alt-rock sort of thing from the mid-'80s. The guy who lived down the hall from me in college used to play a lot of Susie and the Banshees, and I could hear it through the walls. It's cool stuff, though. I don't think Face to Face is the best Susie and the Banshees song I have heard, though. It's pretty good. It's good at keeping the mood of the piece and of the dance scene going. It's just not as good as something like their Dear Prudence cover. But yeah, the only other non-Christmas pop music in this movie is, weirdly enough, Rick James's Super Freak, played by the band at the Masquerade Ball. Sure.
Yeah, and if you were growing up at that time, like, you probably would have thought Can't Touch This by MC Hammer.
That's a different movie we've covered.
Yeah.
Break it down.
And I'm glad there isn't much here in terms of pop music because Elfman's score is such a big part of the film.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost constant in the movie. Like, only 20 minutes of the film is unscored. And I think that reinforces Elfman's operatic approach and that the music is so integral to telling the story. Whereas, as great as the score is for the 1989 film, Prince was sharing a decent bit of the musical work, at least in terms of what we hear in the film. Since the Burton Batman films are anachronistic, like I said earlier, like outside of any one time period, as it were, I think having more of this would only further date the film.
Yeah, and having more very 90s music in Batman Forever and Batman and Robin would shy us away from the sort of timeless, old-fashioned exteriors of the Burton films.
Yeah.
Although something about the Prince music in 89 fits with that world, as weird as it is.
I was thinking the same thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Because so much of it is actually used as diegetic, because they have the song Party Man and Trust that are
Trust
used.
Is
like, great. Yeah, it's great. I still listen to that stuff, man. I love it.
It's a cool soundtrack. Although I will say, I do love the gag in Shaun of the Dead where they're trying to figure out which records to throw at the zombies. And he's like, Batman 89 original soundtrack. Throw it.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Oh, yeah, it's such a great gag.
He's a dirty bird with a deadly exploding umbrella. And she? Well, she is perfectly evil. A destructo feline skilled in flips, kicks, and cartwheels. They must be stopped. Someone must cage the wild animals let loose upon the streets of Gotham City. In Batman Returns from Konami, only you, as the caped crusader himself, can end their wicked reign of terror. It's Super NES action like you've never seen before, simulating all the adventure and intrigue of the hit blockbuster movie.
Step into the silver screen as you fight for justice through 7 cruel and unusual stages. Meet your arch enemies in intense 3D simulation as you command the high-speed Batmobile. And then chill out in Penguin's dreaded Arctic World hideout. Gameplay is designed to appeal to all age and experience levels. Batman Returns brings superhero stature and silver screen simulation to the Super NES, only from Konami.
All right, let's talk about some memorable or key scenes here. I've got a few here, but so the prologue we've talked a little bit about, but to me it's just incredible how big the score gets right off the bat. Just to get in the moment that the Cobblepots are on the bridge, like there's something so epic and heightened about it. And it's like, sure, like this is what made the villain kind of scene, but there's something elevated about it and how heightened it gets, that just that like lingering on the parent's face that long, like knowing their son will never be able to be part of like the Cobblepot aristocracy in Gotham, yet he'll want to ascend the ranks just to destroy it. Like, I don't know. There's just so much to unpack there. And this scene does a lot of that heavy lifting just minutes into the film.
I think it's very much the power of Tim Burton to do really good prologues and to set the scene as well as he can and use the sort of darkness and tonal intrigue of this movie to sort of make this seem grand and epic, and a very great way to start this movie.
Yeah. And even using some of those like point of view shots,
yes,
like from the Penguin's perspective, like when he's down in the sewer, but it starts here when he's peering out through that cage that he's in.
Yeah.
When he eats the cat.
Well, yeah.
Oh, and the scene with Shrek and Selena, whenever she has gotten into these files that she shouldn't have gotten into. What did curiosity do to the cat?
Yeah.
Just little things like when they're talking, you can see the shadows on her face from her large glasses, makes her look like a cat. That was very intentional.
Oh, yeah. And it's still cool.
It's still cool. Yeah. Just this moment that they have together. Like these performances are great. Whenever she's terrified beyond belief and he's approaching her and he's like, Just that little fake out.
Yeah.
And I never put it together that like after he pushes her, he apprises the situation, straightens his jacket and just says, Like it's just a subtle and cool way to close this scene. Like I didn't recognize that continuity they were going, that they
pattern
were
rhythm
there. Yeah. Right.
It's great. And I also just love just how Walken plays this as, you know, he's joking around with her and then eventually pushes her off. It's a tense scene. It's a very, like, you know, something's about to happen. You know that something isn't good here. But the way these actors are playing it, you're just like, you're hooked on, okay, how's she going to play it? How's he going to play it? It's a very interesting sort of scene, especially with that close that we get to it.
Yeah. And we also get that little reference to, like, the password was Shrek's dog. Like, and you can see it's like a stuffed chihuahua. His name's Geraldo. Yeah.
Of course.
That to me, that's got to be Dan Waters.
Well, wasn't that the reference to Geraldo Rivera that Dan Waters didn't like?
Oh, that's right. That's right.
So I think that was Wesley Strick.
Yeah, that's true. It just seems like a Dan Waters thing to me.
Yeah. Although Dan Waters is definitely all over the Selena transforming into Catwoman scene.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about that scene. Because to me, like the thing that I really like about the contrast between when we first see her, when we first establish Selena in her routine, like after she comes home from work, and then goes through the same routine after she's been pushed out the window. Like it's the subversion of that routine, and she's starting to destroy the trappings of her, this cog in a wheel identity that she has, like being the lowly secretary. And she starts to reject that identity so powerfully. And especially when she hears that recording on her answering machine for Gotham Lady Perfume, it says, you can get it now at Shrek's department store. And she throws that carton of milk at it and just goes batshit crazy. But yeah, and then just taking that image of that neon sign from hello there to smashing it into say hell here. Like that is just so striking. And I don't know. This scene is just really, really cool to me.
Oh God. Yeah. Again, it's just a testament to Waters' writing and making it a sort of off kilter kind of, performance and writing.
Because she has that message from her nagging mother and the message from, I guess, some love interest who dumps her over the phone.
Of course.
And I think this comes back into play whenever we see the Penguin and the Catwoman conspiring. Well, first of all, how horny is this movie?
Well, it's a Wesley Strick script, so very.
Because we have that scene with Oswald feeling up his constituents.
Yes.
he's talking about, oh, I want to fill her void. And that scene between the Penguin and Catwoman.
Oh, yeah. The birdcage POVs are just like, oh, okay. That's very okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I really like that. And it's interesting too, like how Catwoman is a sexualized character and how her sexuality is totally off limits and completely hers. Like it's not just that she's not interested in Oswald. She has this reclaimed authority over her body. And I think that that's a tenet of the feminist overtones her character brings to the film. You know, she starts bathing herself, like licking herself like a cat, you know, and there's just all this imagery. But then the Penguin's like, when she says something about Batman being the fly in our ointment, and he's like, ointment? Scented or unscented?
Jesus Christ. You've overlooked the fact that this scene basically starts out with Penguin going, just the pussy I was looking for. Which,
yes, exactly.
Come on now.
But it's a cool scene. Like, I mean, this is, in some respects, the conspiratorial meeting that we got in the 66 Batman series.
Oh, God, yeah.
Where we had villains teaming up all the time.
Love that.
And so I like that we get that here, but it's presented in a much different way. It's so much more grounded in kind of the ground rules that they've established and what these characters want and the world of Gotham that we're embedded in.
Yeah.
Then we get this dance between Selena and Bruce later at the Masquerade Ball. And I remember it being so shocking when she pulls out a fucking gun.
Yeah.
You know, she says she's got a bullet for Shrek and Bruce is trying to talk her down. And that's when they reveal themselves to each other by way of the mistletoe reference from earlier between Batman and Catwoman.
And that's a great moment because it's both, on one hand, we've been fighting each other, but on the other hand, we're also romantically inclined. And it's like, it's very interesting how that sort of dilemma plays out through the rest of this. They would try something similar in another masquerade scene in Dark Knight Rises between Bruce Wayne and Selena Kyle. And that would be relatively similar, although Anne Hathaway, Selena Kyle is not as good as Michelle Pfeiffer in this one.
Yeah. She's so driven, but she's also psychologically unhinged. And so I like when we see her oscillate between being very composed and confident to being insanely, like, where she just burst into laughter for no reason. I like how even when those around her are reacting to that, it's really cool because you can tell how unsettled they are.
Yes.
But yet how so internalized she is. Like how like she is experiencing something else that we can't see.
Yeah. And
you know what I mean?
We're just sort of on the outskirts of it, just like Bruce Wayne is.
Right. Exactly. And then this climax. So, okay, I have one nitpick about this, and it's the biggest offender for me. It's a continuity error.
Yes.
It's when Batman is about to pull his cowl off. Whenever we see Batman, like, he has black makeup around his eyes.
Yeah.
But whenever he's about to rip it off for that shot, he doesn't have any there.
Yep.
And I understand that, we don't want to see Michael Keaton with just these raccoon.
It would be funny.
It would be funny. Yeah. To me, that always caught my attention and it took me out for a minute. So I wish they would have found a more creative way of getting around that.
Yeah. But in general, this climax worked because it's like all of these things coming together. There's a really good chase scene with the Penguin, but also we get the showdown between Shrek and Catwoman. And my favorite line on the movie happens here when Batman unmasks himself and Shrek goes, Selena, there's something other. And Bruce Wayne, why are you dressed up like Batman? Because he is Batman.
Yes, I love that.
So good. Was.
He shoots him. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's great. I like that we see, as a character, like, his thing is, his way of getting out of trouble is to being able to offer somebody something.
Yeah, and him in this scene is great because he's doing, first of all, they're the most walk-and-y reads. They're all great, but he's just really desperate and he's just trying to slime his way out of this one.
Yeah. Again, Michelle Pfeiffer is just stealing the show here when she has this moment with Bruce Wayne and she's like, I would love to come live with you in your castle, just like the fairy tale and stuff. To me, even though like the Penguin is, like, he himself and the movie are trying to present him as a tragic character.
Yeah.
I feel like, of course, they're treating her the same way, but I think she's much more tragic. And that she's a product, not just of like this, of having shitty parents who cast out their son, but she is a victim of being made to believe that she had this particular station in life and that's who she was, and being mistreated by an industrial city run by white men.
Yeah.
In this moment, she's a very sad character because you can tell she wants so much more, but everything she's been doing as Catwoman has been to get revenge on Shrek, but also this nebulous oppressive force. Is that any of that making sense?
Yeah, no, it makes sense.
In that moment, we see a deeper Selena, like
yes,
kind of the soul laid bare kind of thing.
Yeah.
But she doesn't stay there very long.
No, because she jams back up and we have, our finish to this.
Right. Her moment with Shrek. The thing is, it's like she's already died so many times and she's got 2 lives left.
Yeah.
She uses one to kill herself and Shrek. The 9 lives thing, this almost feels like a bit of a supernatural thing here. But
it sort of works.
It sort of works. I don't love it, but I'm fine with it.
It's once again, it's very Wesley Strick, but it serves the purpose of keeping Selena Kyle alive toward the end of this film. It allows more, times for her to come back up and get these characters. It works for the purposes of this film, although I don't know if it's a good full addition to the character.
News alert. Someone is stealing Gotham City's power supply. Danger of citywide blackout.
When you want a Diet Coke, you want a Diet Coke. After all, there's just one. Diet Coke. Just for the taste.
All right, Jordan.
Yes.
And the award for extra of the movie goes to...
This was an easy one for me. I gave this one to the scowling old lady that Batman almost hits with the Batmobile when Penguin is controlling his car, which she just turns to the camera and gives this scowl.
Yes.
That is clearly the extra of the movie.
Yeah, this one was pretty easy. And I had a feeling that this is who you were going to go for.
It had to be.
I try to see if you pick who I think you're going to pick.
I'm glad I've become predictable.
Oh, no, well, hey, I mean, we've only been doing that for 3 episodes. So.
Yeah, I imagine I'll get a lot of the ones you think I will. Sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes, like the Fugitive one is like, okay, that guy is clearly going for like a real read there when he shouldn't.
All right, Jordan. Final thoughts on Batman Returns.
On one hand, I still like Batman 89 better because I have a lot more connection with that one. But Batman Returns is breathtaking. The darkness, the setting of Gotham on ice, the comic book horror we're thrown into is all fantastic. With 2 insanely intricate and developed villain characters, each with fantastic doubling and contrast from Belf. This one arguably takes less time to get going than Batman 89 and does a lot more. With the big army of penguins moment near the climax nearly lost me, though. It was the full culmination of Wesley Strick's campier, less ironic additions to Dan Waters' very ironic base of the script. It was almost completely ridiculous, and yet it didn't seem so in the way that fit the rest of the film. It sort of worked, even in the end, but it threw me. Also, while this is a Batman movie, as I've talked about this in this episode, Batman is a small section of it. Take Batman out of the equation, and Kyle will still kill Shrek. Cobblepot will still fall victim to his own greed and disdain for humanity. Batman, kind of like Indiana Jones in Raiders of the Lost Ark, was active enough to be an important player in this film, but passive enough to let the central conflict enact itself without any, especially getting hurt or hurting anyone, except for that strong man. He does sort of get hurt in that he loses Selena, in a sense, but it's something that's ambiguous enough to assume that he'll get over it, and by Batman Forever, he has. But this is still a phenomenal movie. Just as good as the first while feeling more like a Tim Burton movie and less like a John Peters movie. I finally get why everyone truly loves this one. I really appreciate what it brings to the table, and I get why Jack likes this one better than the first one.
Yeah, I mean, like you, I still like 89 better personally, just because that's always been like a hardcore favorite for me growing up. Yeah. But this one it's simply gorgeous. Like every frame, like it's hard not to compare the two because I saw them both in theaters and grew up comparing them to each other in subsequent Batman films. But I enjoyed this one a great deal growing up. But my biggest criticism was that, as you pointed out, Batman is such a small part of it, but Batman doesn't need more to do here, I think. And as an adult, I recognize that more now. Now, that said, the two complement each other very well. And this feels like an appropriate extension of the first one, if not a direct sequel. When I listened to Siskel and Ebert's review of this, Gene Siskel made a good point in his critique of the film, saying that one thing this film does exceedingly well is having characters, quote, with very private pain that's worked out publicly.
Yeah.
And I think that articulates something I notice and appreciate more now that my relationship to the movie has matured. There's another layer that I felt like that I tapped into that I had not yet had access to or was able to understand. And I think it's a near perfect movie. Like Gotham's firstborn sons thing I could do without since this movie's already tackling a lot, but it's forgivable. Like this has great writing, great set pieces, and it's something that's aged very well. Like it's rich enough to gain a little more from it through subsequent viewings. And it's still a really great way to spend 2 hours living in this operatic and theatrical world that Waters, Burton, and Elfman have helped to create.
And now, coming soon to video cassette.
How could such a thing happen, Dr. Cabal?
The ant's saliva must have gotten into Bill's bloodstream and gone straight to his brain, just as the radiation, which is measured in units called Roentgens, was released.
And that's how he became a...
Mant.
Gotcha. For the kids of Key West, Florida, there was nothing scarier than a monster matinee.
Lawrence Wolfe, the master of movie horror, exterminates you with Mant.
The story of Mant is based on scientific fact, on theories that have appeared in national magazines.
But in the fall of 1962,
A series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on the island of Cuba.
they got the biggest scare of all.
They're gonna bomb us?
The country is on red alert. And what a perfect time to open a new horror movie.
That'd be the best show to take a girl to.
The whole world's gonna blow up anyway, so we should just do whatever we want.
You know, last guy she went out with in the farm school?
You did teach me a lot.
What about?
About my body.
Think if the bomb were about to fall, she'd do it with me?
Wait till you see the feelers on this thing.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Some of it's stage lighting, some of it's magic show stuff, but the big studios, none of them have anything like it. You never, ever turn one above 6.
This is it!
From Joe Dante, director of Gremlins.
You see what he's putting back? The showmanship.
The bombs are falling!
You think this is some kind of picnic for me?
I'm still concerned about that bomb thing.
A little question of taste?
No, but your younger patrons, you could have some seat wetness.
John Goodman,
I love this business.
matinee.
Man, I've seen this twice.
The holiday season is here, and we want to say how thankful we are for our casual and preferred renters over on Patreon. Lewis, Mike, and Jack from Random Movie Roulette, Mondo, Pete, Ryan M, Ryan S, Jacob and Tab from Test Pattern, Naomi and Rich from Bloody in Love, and Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, always.
Thank you all so much for supporting the show. We appreciate it so much. And we're gearing up for some more great content for you in 2021. If you're not a patron, but are interested in becoming one, head over to patreon.com/VericonVideo for more information about all the great perks you can get starting at $2 a month. The price of a Batman Returns Happy Meal toy on eBay. Such as bonus episodes not available on our main feed, commentaries, and a super cool gift pack loaded with Vericon Video merch and some other little surprises.
And remember to rate and review the show on iTunes. If you have questions, suggestions, or just want to tell us what you think of the show, drop us a line at vericonvideo@gmail.com.
Or you can DM us on Twitter at Vericon Video, or you can call and leave a message on the Vericon Video hotline at 312-620-5560. That's all for today, but we will return in 2021, and we'll see you then right back here at Vericon Video. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, everyone.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, y'all. Goodwill toward men and women.
Goodbye, Vietnam! That's right. I'm history. I'm out of here. I got the lucky ticket home, baby.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Jenny.
Bye-bye, boys.
Have fun storming the castle. Goodbye.
Do take good care of yourself.
What is this, your farewell speech? Going home. Have a good trip.
Hasta la vista, baby.
I have to go.
Adieu, auf Wiedersehen, Gesundheit.
Farewell.